South Carolina has a big game with the LSU Tigers football team later on this fall. How do we feel about the game and what else going on over in Baton Rouge? I'm joined by Locked On LSU's Caroline Fenton to discuss all of that and a bit more on today's Locked On Gamecocks.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation, and welcome back to the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Line, and I thank y'all so much for making the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen or watch for your team here today. We are free and available both on YouTube and wherever you get your audio podcasts daily. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, and that's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team both faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. It is a crossover Tuesday here on the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, as I'm pleased to be joined by Locked On LSU host Caroline Fenton to talk about a big football game these two programs have against one another later this fall, and also South Carolina's recent baseball coaching hire, which we'll get into at the tail end of the show. Caroline, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Appreciate you for having me. For two teams and programs that traditionally don't really have a lot of crossover. It seems like we've had a lot of it recently, whether it's women's basketball, obviously playing each other in Willie B this upcoming fall, and now a baseball coach. Seems like we're just crossing paths a whole lot these days, but I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, that seems to be life in the new SEC. South Carolina, they're playing LSU this fall. They're playing several teams from what's now kind of the old SEC West, so to speak. So it's going to be an interesting year for the Gamecocks. But as far as the actual game itself, Carolina, I kind of feel like that this is a game that hasn't really garnered a lot of offseason discussion as far as the SEC landscape is concerned. They came out with the schedule fully earlier this afternoon, I should say, for all SEC teams. This had the noon slot on ABC for week 3. And I have to say, I think that this is an advantage for LSU because, for one, the heat is going to be damn near unbearable in Columbia, South Carolina. Anybody that's been over here in the month of September, August, or anytime during the summer would know that. It's also just the second home game for South Carolina fans. So they're still going to be getting back into the swing of things as far as, pregame festivities are concerned. And Williams-Brice, I think everyone would agree in the SEC, it's a far more imposing environment when it is a night game here in Columbia. So based on Brian Kelly's short history at LSU, how the Tigers have performed in noon games the past couple years, do you feel the same way?
So, in terms of heat, that's something that we know all too well. So, yeah,
Right.
it's not going to be like it's really much of a challenge or much of a relief. You got the lowlands, we got the swamp. It's going to be sticky and it's going to be muggy no matter where we are. Looking at the history of Brian Kelly in noon games, I can go back to last season against Mississippi State when LSU just absolutely demolished the Bulldogs. Or we could go back to the year before when LSU hosted Tennessee at home for an 11 a.m. kick, and they got a butt whooping of their own. So in terms of 11 a.m. games, noon kickoffs, 11 a.m. in Baton Rouge, noon in Columbia, LSU does not play a lot of them, frankly. LSU always gets the night games, especially if it's at home. It's going to be a night game. So I don't really know if there's enough of a sample size truly to say, okay, this is how LSU plays in noon games. I believe it was a noon kickoff against Texas A&M the Saturday after Thanksgiving this past season, and LSU ended up winning that game, but it was a lot more uncomfortable than I think LSU fans would admit. The kickoff time is, I don't know if there's enough history in the last 2 years with Brian Kelly to say that they traditionally play well or they traditionally don't. But looking at it early in the season, LSU opens the season with USC. They come back home, play, in-state rival, quote unquote, Nichols, and then on the road at South Carolina. So that's 2 games on the road in 3 weeks. That's opening up with, a weird to say this, a Big Ten opponent in USC. So LSU is going to be smacked in the mouth early, at least, and they're going to have to figure out what their identity is early in the season. So I do think that having that one game, a power now 4 opponent, now the RAP Pac-12, I think that will help a young and new offense with a lot of a lot of new pieces. It'll help them figure out who they want to be early. I would say it's advantage LSU, especially with it being an 11 a.m. game. I think Williams-Brice, very similar to Tiger Stadium, it's a force multiplier, especially at night. Williams-Brice is an underratedly intimidating and scary place to play. I do radio shows a lot with Aaron Murray, and he would tell me, like, I don't like to play at Williams-Brice at night, or at least he didn't when he was at Georgia. So I do think that getting at least South Carolina during the day, before the lights come on at night at Williams-Brice would be an advantage. At least anytime you can play it during the day on the road, I think it's an advantage for the road team.
I'm very positive that Aaron Murray is probably referring to the 2012 game. Georgia, I think, was 5th. South Carolina was 6th. You can maybe ask him. Granted, that would probably bring up bad memories. They lost 35-7 that night. I was at that game, one of the loudest games I've ever been a part of here at Williams-Brice Stadium. So, yeah, I definitely can understand your point about the time slot with LSU. For South Carolina, they play Kentucky in week 2. So, hey, if South Carolina wins that game, that might give them some confidence going into this matchup. If they lose, then obviously LSU, I think everyone can agree no matter what, that's a tougher matchup on paper than Kentucky would be. So, definitely sort of interesting dynamic with the schedule and everything. Going to the coaches real quick, I think that this is a pivotal season for both Shane Beamer and Brian Kelly. For Shane Beamer, it's pretty doggone obvious. You went 5-7 last year after you built some serious momentum at the end of 2022, defeating Tennessee and Clemson and going toe-to-toe with Notre Dame at a prominent bowl game in the Gator Bowl. And then, had a losing year last year. For Brian Kelly, it might be a little bit more hidden because, sure, Brian Kelly, he's outperformed Shane Beamer. There's no questions about that. But in terms of recruiting, Texas and Oklahoma have now joined the SEC. You lose a bit of an advantage in that regard. And so I think it's going to be a bit tougher maybe to convince kids west of your home state border to maybe come to LSU. That might be something that moving forward, it's like, hey, it's, of utmost importance now. We've got to win these games. We certainly can't lose a game to South Carolina. The LSU fans, I understand, they don't expect to lose. So overall, Caroline, my question here is this. Who needs this game more, Shane Beamer or Brian Kelly?
Ooh, well, I'll say it. I would agree with you and wholeheartedly that it's a pivotal season for both of them. I'll make my case for Brian Kelly, and you make your case for Shane Beamer. Absolutely, I would say for Brian Kelly going into year 3, LSU fans expect more. Year 1, absolutely overachieved. You beat Alabama at home. You get to the SEC championship game. You win 10 games, 9 regular season games in a bowl game in Brian Kelly's first season. Season 1, A+++ ahead of schedule. Year 2, another 9-win regular season, another 10-win season with the addition of the bowl game against Wisconsin in the ReliaQuest Bowl, a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback in year 2. Like all of the boxes that you want to see checked for a coach, especially with the expectations at LSU. Brian Kelly's checked a lot of them in just his first 2 seasons, but LSU is not the kind of fan base that says, well, we had a Heisman Trophy winner. We went to the SEC championship in year 1, so it's okay if we take a step back. No. LSU fans expect even more. LSU fans, and I've talked about this on the podcast, I think it's a fair expectation to expect LSU to get to the college football playoff now that it's expanding to 12 games. LSU's got some freaking doozies on the schedule. Open up with USC in Vegas. They host UCLA, and then obviously they get Alabama and Texas A&M and an Ole Miss team that's shaping up to be, one of the better teams in the country. Another team with college football playoff hopes. So it's not an easy schedule. No schedule in the SEC is going to be easy, but I would say for a team that has that has college football playoff aspirations and not a whole lot of gimmies on the schedule, LSU fans view this as a game that they should win, even though it's on the road and even though it's a tough place to play. It's a South Carolina team that underachieved last year. You don't bring Spencer Rattler back. It's a question at the quarterback position. You lose Juice Wells. I think that LSU fans, myself included, view this South Carolina team as maybe in search of an identity and an opportunity to notch an SEC win early in the season to kind of continue that momentum as the schedule just ramps up more and more throughout the rest of the fall.
Yeah, well, for Shane Beamer, mentioned earlier again, went 5-7 in 2023. So obviously for Beamer, it's like, okay, we're not going to ask you to win like 8-9 games against this schedule. Like, just like you said with LSU, South Carolina, doozy of a schedule. I think we could say that for almost everybody now in the SEC, admittedly. So,
Totally.
for Beamer, hey, let's make it back to a bowl game. And maybe let's try to find a win or two on the schedule that, again, some people are going to say there's no shot they're going to win that game. LSU, admittedly, probably one of them. But if you're a South Carolina fan, hey, just a season ago, despite you having a 5-7 record, you took Georgia, I don't want to say down to the wire, but you gave them a pretty good fight in Athens. You were winning 14-3 at half. So if you could do that in the back-to-back defending national champions house, then hey, this could be a game that you could steal. So arguably, definitely a pivotal game for both of these coaches.
Game. That game with Georgia was such a good game.
Yeah, the first 5 minutes of the third quarter, once all those plays started to take place, the South Carolina got pinned inside the 20. Gamecock fans, I think, just knew it. Oh boy, okay, Georgia's waking up now, and this is starting to turn. So
they're just inevitable.
Again, yeah, oh yeah, no, that's just the way it goes in Athens right now because Kirby Smart's got that place rolling as we speak. What does LSU look like offensively and defensively? A lot of changes in terms of personnel and also in terms of the coaching staff. Caroline will give Gamecock fans a deep dive into all of that in just a few moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality candidates that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team, both faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. And I can assure you, if Caroline or myself were in this situation, we would absolutely be using LinkedIn Jobs in order to find quality candidates to fill out certain roles in our own small business. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free today. Terms and conditions do apply. Welcome back to this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day. And as always, appreciate each and every one of you everydayers who make the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first choice for South Carolina Gamecocks sports coverage. Caroline, I think it's fair to say LSU, they've undergone a lot of changes this offseason. And so let's start with the offensive side of the ball. Clearly, Jaden Daniels, Heisman Trophy winner, probably one of the most accomplished quarterbacks to have ever stepped foot on that football field for the Tigers. He's gone. Malik Neighbors, first-round pick. He's also gone. First rounder, Brian Thomas Jr. wide receiver. I believe first rounder. He is also gone. Logan Diggs is gone at running back. Mike Denbrock, I believe, went back to Notre Dame. So a lot of change at key personnel spots, and your play caller has left town. So when looking at all these changes, Caroline, what's the current feeling surrounding LSU's offense at this point in the offseason?
Crazily enough, optimism and excitement, because as many pieces left from last season, and electric offense, number one offense in the country, Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. As much as LSU lost, as you just mentioned, Jaden Daniels gone, your two leading pass catchers gone. They lost their running back, Logan Diggs, to the transfer portal. He's headed to Ole Miss. Mike Denbrock headed back to Notre Dame. There's also a lot of continuity. And you might be thinking, like, what? How is that possible? You lost a lot, but you also bring a lot back. And I'll break it down. You lose Jaden Daniels to the NFL draft. Well, Garrett Nussmeier is taking over that starting role. Garrett Nussmeier has been at LSU for the last 3 years as a backup, when he could have had an opportunity to transfer, and he probably could have been a starter at darn near close to every other SEC program out there that was in need of a quarterback. But he wanted to stick around and kind of wait it out and carve out his starting role at LSU. So he's been with this coaching staff the last 2 years. He's been the backup for the last 2 years. Whenever you're going through a quarterback pivot, I don't think that you could ask for a better situation than you have with Garrett Nussmeier, who's been in the fold and learning and maturing and growing physically, mentally, emotionally over the last 3 seasons. He already has experience playing in an SEC championship game. I don't know of a lot of backup quarterbacks in the SEC that can say that. Mike Denbrock leaves. He was a massive part of this offense. Absolutely. His familiarity with Brian Kelly, his familiarity with Jaden Daniels, his track record with quarterbacks that have a very similar skill set with Jaden Daniels, he leaves. Well, The new offensive coordinators, Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton, well, they were the quarterbacks coach and wide receivers coaches, respectively, of the past 2 seasons under Mike Denbrock. Joe Sloan was in the booth with Mike Denbrock last season. He was calling plays in the bowl game after Mike Denbrock left for Notre Dame. So you kind of have two apprentices of Mike Denbrock that are taking over this role. You lose Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, one of the top wide receiver duos in LSU history, up there with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry. Like, those are big time names there. That's what they were able to accomplish. Well, LSU has Kyron Lacey coming back. And although that might not be a name that's a household name across college football now, he's a guy with a lot of talent and a lot of experience that didn't have a massive role in this offense last season because he was behind Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. Chris Hilton Jr. is another name that I expect to take a next step forward. Brian Kelly's been raving about Kyron Lacey in spring practice and in the offseason, how he's kind of taken on this leadership role. And really, if it's not Kyron Lacey or Chris Hilton, this wide receiver room is stacked. It is stacked. Not a lot of proven talent and not a lot of household names that are returning, but names that feel prepped and ready to kind of fill in these roles that are left, massive shoes that are left by Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. Mason Taylor, the tight end, comes back. He was dealing with some health issues last year, but some people might remember the 2-point conversion against Alabama that got LSU the win at home against Alabama in 2022. Well, Mason Taylor caught that 2-point conversion. He's another one that's another year older, another year more established in this offense. The biggest thing, Andrew, that I think gives me the most confidence about this LSU offense is the offensive line. I think that LSU has the best bookend tackles in the country. Will Campbell on the left side, he's been starting since day one his freshman year. I think he's going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. Emory Jones on the right side also has been starting since day one his freshman year. I think he's going to be a first rounder in the 2025 NFL draft. So you've got two bookends on your offensive line that have played together for the past 2 years. And you've got a lot of continuity at guard. The only change is at center. Charles Turner left for the NFL draft. DJ Chester comes in and fills at that role. But you have an offensive line that's worked largely together as a unit over the last 2 seasons. So it's a lot of change, but there's a lot of remnants from that 2023 unit that was so impactful and really carried LSU to a 10-3 season.
Caroline, we're going to call an audible real quick, and instead of talking about the defense, because you intrigued me with what you just said about the offense, let's talk about Garrett Nussmeier, and let's relate this back to the game against South Carolina. You are definitely right. Garrett Nussmeier been at Baton Rouge for a few years now, started multiple games, played in an SEC championship game. Certainly not many quarterbacks can say that they've done that in this league. If there's one thing that I would point out in regards to the game, it's the fact that he's never played in a true road game. He's played some neutral site games and clearly some big marquee games in and of itself. But, his experience in Williams-Brice will be his first away from Baton Rouge and, barring, anything in a bowl game. So when you think about that aspect, do you think that all those mental reps, that's going to, help him overcome maybe the potential jitters that a lot of first-time stars would usually get in that kind of SEC road environment?
It's still absolutely going to be, I think, a shock, as it would be for any quarterback. And I don't care how long you may have been a backup or how long you may have been in a system. When you're the guy, it's different. And this is Garrett Nussmeier's first offseason going into the season as the guy. And he's come in for snaps here and there. I recall the Missouri game. Jaden Daniels went down with a rib injury. Garrett Nussmeier came in, and it didn't look great for a couple of sequences. So it's not going to be his very first exposure to a road SEC environment, but it will be the first time as the guy. The offense is going to look different because Garrett Nussmeier is not Jaden Daniels. Like, not very many quarterbacks have a skill set that Jaden Daniels had. So it will look different, and there will be a learning curve that, frankly, you just can't really get through in practice. I don't care if it's going to be, live looks in practice. I don't care if you're going as hard as you possibly can in practice. It's not going to be the exact same as a game. So I do think that's a really interesting element to look at here is, as experienced as Garrett Nussmeier was as a backup and is coming in as the starter, this game will be his first true road test.
It's not very often that South Carolina has crossover with LSU as far as coaching changes are concerned. Caroline, you mentioned that at the beginning of the show, but that all changed earlier this week as South Carolina officially hired former LSU head coach and national championship winning coach, I might add, in Paul Mainieri. So, Gamecock fans, what should you expect from this new hire? We'll ask Caroline about that in a few moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 that you can use to bet everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. NBA Finals are currently going on right now between the Boston Celtics and the Dallas Mavericks. Boston's currently up 2-0. Just a couple days ago, the odds for them sweeping the Mavericks was set at plus 275. Well, guess what? FanDuel now thinks that that's even less likely. The odds have been pushed up to plus 310. Prop bet, that one might be one to put some money on. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your team every single day in 30 minutes or less. South Carolina hired former LSU head coach Paul Mainieri on Monday. News broke then that they had targeted him. When I first read it, I had to do a double take. I did not see this coming. Nobody in Columbia, South Carolina saw this coming, and I think very few people even nationally saw this coming. But Paul Mainieri, look, no matter how it ended in Baton Rouge, I mean, there's no denying the man's resume is incredible. National championship, multiple regular season and conference tournament titles with the Tigers. Pretty much been successful everywhere that he has been throughout his career. The only real question mark is the fact that he's going to be 67 by the start of this next baseball season. So, Caroline, saying all of that, what should Gamecock fans expect from a Paul Mainieri-led baseball program? What are his strengths? Are there any question marks maybe you might have on your end coming out of this hire?
First of all, you're going to love Paul. He is so kind. He's so fun. He's incredibly gracious with his time with the media. I was a student reporter for a portion of Paul Mainieri's tenure at LSU, and I'm fumbling with a camera, with a microphone. I don't really know what I'm doing, but there is Paul Mainieri, so incredibly patient and gracious with his time. So you're gonna love him. Like, he is such a nice person. He's a great coach and just an incredible human being. Paul Mainieri, I mean, the record and the resume speaks for himself. He won a national championship at LSU in 2009, got LSU back to the College World Series final in 2017, where they ultimately lost to Florida in Game 3. Paul Mainieri is also a fantastic recruiter. I think that was one of his really great claims to fame, was bringing in top talent, and not just bringing top talent in, but developing top talent. And his record and resume of players that found themselves in Major League Baseball, not just getting to the show, but being, like, figures and big time household names in Major League Baseball. Aaron Nola, Alex Bregman, DJ LeMahieu, the list goes on and on. That's all credit to the recruitment, the development, and the coaching up of Paul Mainieri. As nice as he is to the media, like, he can get on some players now. Like, he's going to run a very tight ship. I think it's a fantastic hire for South Carolina. But the one question that I guess I have two questions. One of the reasons why he left LSU in June of 2021, he wanted to spend time with his family, and there were some health complications. That he had some neck issues, back issues. He was experiencing chronic migraines, and just the grind of being a college coach, and also what was looming in July of 2021 with the Supreme Court decision legalizing college athletes benefiting on NIL. I think that was all just kind of a lot for him, that it was just getting too much at his age and kind of in his physical state. So I was surprised to see that he wanted to come back, but I think that just goes to show the itch that he had and how much he loves and adores coaching. He loves the game. He loves coaching up players. He loves developing young men. So that's one question that I have, is in a health capacity, something that was kind of plaguing him at LSU, is that going to continue at South Carolina, or was the 3 years that he had off all that he needed to kind of get back to 100%? The second thing is similar to what I just alluded to. Paul Mainieri's never lived in this world of NIL. A lot of things have changed in the last 3 years with college sports. The transfer portal is as alive and well as it has ever been, and it's not slowing down anytime soon. You have to re-recruit your roster constantly. It's free agency twice a year. And oh yeah, by the way, not only are you recruiting kids and having conversations about how they'll be developed in the role that they'll play and how they can get to Major League Baseball and the classes that they're going to take, all of those things that may have worked in 2015. Well, now you have to talk to them about how much money they're going to make. Now you have to be a liaison between the collective and the families that are coming to get recruited by South Carolina. I don't think that Paul Mainieri would be coming back into college baseball and into college athletics if he wasn't accepting that and wholeheartedly and willing to take that on 100%. But it's a different beast now, and it's difficult. So that's kind of what I wonder is, what is Paul Mainieri in this new era of college sports? But overall, the guy loves baseball. Overall, the guy loves developing young talent, and he is a proven commodity. I know South Carolina fans have probably been frustrated of where the program has been over the last few years. Look at Omaha, 4 SEC teams, South Carolina not in it. 4 SEC teams last year, South Carolina not in it. I mean, heck, my team won it all last year, and I'm frustrated that my team's not in it this year. So I get it. Like I can relate. Baseball fans, they want success year in and year out. And I don't know if Paul Mainieri can deliver that year one, but what I can assure you is that you're going to see really good baseball being played by a Paul Mainieri-led team.
Yeah, you mentioned South Carolina, probably being frustrated. Carolina, I can confirm to you, the fan base has been more than frustrated for a very long time now. Last time they made it to Omaha was back in 2012. Obviously, that was a part of a historical run where they competed for 3 national titles and won 2 of them. Probably something that, South Carolina fans have acknowledged long now. They're never going to see that again. But now it's just like, we would just like to make it back. We would just like to say that we made it, once every few years. And obviously SEC is much deeper. You're absolutely right. It's a very different sport. I think it helps South Carolina a lot that athletic director Ray Tanner was the baseball coach when they were having all that success.
Has a good relationship with Paul Mainieri. Yeah,
exactly. Knows Skip Berkman, knows the entire LSU fraternity as far as the successful coaches that have been through that building for the past few decades. So I think that all of that helped South Carolina out a lot. I'm sure both sides asked some really hard questions regarding NIL. How long do you have? Are you willing to go through this for maybe at least 5 years or so? Because I don't think Paul Mainieri is going to stay here for, 10 plus years. I think this is about a 5 to 8 year plan. And maybe you have a head coach in waiting at some point on his staff. So, but
another quick note there. Sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
That Terry Rooney is hired to Paul Mainieri's staff. Terry Rooney was with Paul Mainieri back in 08-09 with LSU and has made a couple of trips back. He was most recently a recruiting coordinator on Jay Johnson's staff. He was a pitching coach and, the head of recruiting, whatever term you want to use for that, with LSU, and was a pivotal part in building that 2009 College World Series team. Has a great relationship, a long-time working relationship with Paul Mainieri. So Terry Rooney is another one that's a good get for the Gamecocks.
South Carolina fans definitely most energetic that I think I've seen them in several years. Mark Kingston, last coach, had some success here relatively, but with what you said about Paul Mainieri earlier, his relationship with the media, how much he's willing to go out of his way, great stuff to hear. Mark Kingston, I don't want to say he was the exact opposite, but he was kind of close to it. It was like talking to a brick wall sometimes, in all honesty, asking questions. Yeah.
Paul won't be a brick wall. He will talk and talk and talk and talk to, sometimes you're looking at your watch and you're like, Paul, I gotta go. Like, my camera's dying. So he's truly the opposite of that. He is a chatty Cathy for sure.
Well, I think that South Carolina fans and media will definitely be okay with that after what they've dealt with the last few years in the Mark Kingston tenure. Caroline, I can't thank you enough for coming on to today's show. Thank you so much. Where can all of the Gamecock fans find all of your work on LSU and all the other stuff that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me at Locked On LSU on your preferred podcast platform, on YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter at Caroline Fenton 1 and on the local Nashville airwaves from 11 to 2 p.m. on 102.5 The Game.
Sounds awesome. Well, Caroline, thank you once again for coming on to today's show. For all you Locked On Gamecocks viewers and listeners, thank you for tuning in as always. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I'll be sure to catch you on the next show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.